2020 was a lot of things for a lot of people, but the only one of those things that's relevant now is that it was an ideal time for me to clear out my backlog considering how few games actually came out. How was it for me gaming wise overall? It was better than 2018. This list was especially hard to make because I played a lot of good games this year, but not many great ones. The bottom few entries were basically chosen at random, and there were plenty of games I decided not to put on the list because something similar was already on here. Same rules as usual apply. One per franchise, only games I've played, and these are games I played this year. Almost none of them actually came out this year. Anyway, let's get into it. The Pedestrian is an interesting idea for a game. You play as one of those little icon people you find on restroom signs and move around a city, hopping from sign to sign. Sometimes it'll have you rearranging signs and connecting them to each other, which makes for a lot of good puzzles. The puzzles are really nice because they're never cryptic or confusing. They just take a bit of trial and error to figure out. The game is also beautiful. It manages to contrast the simplicity of the signs you're on with the richly detailed city in the background. It manages to show you a good deal of it when you're moving between signs. Now, I know Poi looks really cheap and generic, but the game behind these lackluster visuals is pretty good. It's very Super Mario 64-esque, having multiple worlds, each with a handful of missions. While there's only 4 worlds, each of them is well designed, memorable, and fun to explore. The hub world is also a lot of fun, starting off as just an airship in the sky, but having more ships and islands appear as you progress, with each one giving you something new to do. Seriously, I'm pretty sure there's more content here than in the normal missions. The game has its issues, like the movement being a bit clunky and the cheap looking visuals, but you get used to both of those problems pretty fast. At the end of the day, Poi is just a lot of fun. You know, I've played a lot of games this year that were similar to VA11 Hall A. Out of all of them, the best was 2064 Read-Only Memories. Technically, this is a point-and-click game, but it's not that puzzle-heavy, so it feels more like a visual novel, which probably explains why I enjoyed it. The story has you unraveling a massive corporate conspiracy in this advanced cyberpunk world. The mystery's not amazing, but it serves the story well enough. The world feels really fleshed out, and while it doesn't pose questions as deep as the Red Strings Club, seeing the way the characters around you react to it is more than enough. The biggest highlight of the game, though, is Turing. He accompanies you throughout the whole game, is really well developed, and just plain adorable. Maybe not as much as Horace, but he's a close second for cutest robot in a game I've played. Not much more to say, really. It's a suspenseful, clever adventure in a cool, interesting world with a phenomenal companion. Klaus is a strange game. It's a puzzle platformer where you switch between 2 characters, Klaus and K1. The levels have interesting mechanics, fun gameplay, and are generally a blast to go through. What's really unique about the game, though, is that the levels show the characters' thoughts in the background as you progress. This gives you a great idea of who these 2 are, what their hopes and dreams are, how they feel about each other, and their thoughts on the 3rd character in the game. You. Yeah, their thoughts directly address the player, but not in a meta, fourth wall kind of way. They treat you, as in the person controlling them, not as a mere player, but as another character in the game. They directly talk to you, which makes everything these 2 have to say feel much more personal and makes you connect with them that much more. People wonder what a second-person game would look like, and I think this is it. My only issue with this game is when it tries to have boss fights, because they're pretty bad. Other than that, this is a fun platformer and a surreal character study. I tried out a good deal of roguelikes this year, 2 of which I actually liked. Neither of them were Hades though. I'll get to that one when I get to it. The first one was Dicey Dungeons, which was fun, but I didn't find myself playing it that much. Then there's Going Under. To start with, I absolutely love this art style. The bright colors and minimalistic shapes really do it for me. The whole game is a parody of internships, and considering I'm about to go into the workforce, I have a feeling I'm going to relate to this a lot more soon enough. The combat is simple and fun, revolving around all the different weapons you find lying around. And while the upgrades aren't especially impactful, they serve their purpose well enough. This game's no Isaac, but it's fun to return to every now and then. This year, I played 2 comedy dating simulators that were made by a YouTuber, and despite how specific that criteria is, they were wildly different. Dream Daddy is a sort of Bob's Burgers type of humor. It wants to make you laugh, but also puts you at ease. Each of the dads are well-developed characters, and the game gets you invested in all of their stories. It's a nice game that's worthy of this list, but it's not the one I went with. Instead, I went with Pizza Game. This might just be the stupidest game I've ever played, but in all the right ways. It's essentially a parody of bad fanfiction. The main character gets everything she wants despite being a selfish idiot. Her potential dates, and really all of the characters, are different shades of insane. The plot lines are stupid, horribly written, and often make no sense. Virtually every line has a typo in it, and I love every second of it. What else can I say? All this game really needed to do was be funny, and it had me laughing the whole way through, which is saying something because this game's pretty long. They're able to mix up the insanity enough to keep things fresh, and despite it being supposedly impossible to take seriously, the game had a really epic finale that might have made my best finales list if I could find footage of it. Given all the game studios that have fallen from grace recently, it's easy to forget about Telltale. They were originally seen as visionaries, but spread themselves too thin, making their weaknesses more obvious and causing their games to suffer. At least their classics still hold up, case in point, The Wolf Among Us. Your choices barely mean anything, but they don't need to here. The game has a compelling world, a suspenseful mystery, and the choices are just a mechanism to strap you in for the ride. I know I said it before, but I beat this game in 2 days because I kept wanting to see what happened next. I'm not gonna say any more because either you've already played it or I'd just be spoiling things for you. This year had a lot of disappointments gaming-wise, from Shantae and the Seven Sirens to Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated to games that actually made the list but weren't as good as I was hoping. Luckily, there were a few pleasant surprises as well. I expected What the Golf to be good for a few cheap laughs, and that's about it. What I got was an incredibly creative game with insane amounts of variety. The basic premise is that a lab is trying to make golf more interesting by mixing it up in various ways. This premise gets stretched further than you can imagine. Some of the gimmicks include switching the balls with other objects, messing with the gravity, and even using mechanics from other games like Angry Birds and Portal. And that's just scratching the surface. It's insane how many ways this game mixes things up. It never gets boring because they always find something new to throw at you. So, after getting a bit tired of GTA-style open-world games, I figured I'd mix it up with something a bit different. Yakuza 0 has a lot going for it. A deep, complex, and dramatic main story, accompanied by all sorts of hilariously goofy side stories. An overworld that's relatively small, but has a lot to do in it, plenty of upgrades, fun mini-games, and a really satisfying combat system with a good deal of variety. I only have one real issue with the game, and sadly, it's a pretty big one. The game doesn't really feel that open. I'm not saying the world's too small or the game's too linear, it all has to do with the way the chapters are structured. The game is constantly switching you between Kiryu and Majima, who not only have separate stories and abilities, but live in separate towns. One of the main things I like about open world games is the freedom they offer. So long as I'm not in a mission, I can go exploring and do whatever I want, whenever I want. However, since everything is split between Kiryu and Majima, and you can't freely switch between them, that feeling of freedom isn't really there. You have to operate around the game's schedule, which works in other genres, but not in an open world game, at least not for me. It also doesn't help that Kiryu's urban playground is significantly more interesting than Majima's gilded cage. As a result, instead of appreciating the dichotomy between these two, I was mostly speeding through Majima's segments to get back to Kiryu's, even though Majima's fighting styles were cooler. Aside from that big structural issue though, this game is great, and I'm looking forward to playing other games in the series, which I assume won't have the same problem. So the two games I was most hyped for this year were Psychonauts 2 and No More Heroes 3, neither of which came out. Luckily, we got a game that feels like a combination of both series, No Straight Roads. This game has the general structure of No More Heroes, a similar art style to Psychonauts, and like both of them, it cleverly uses the locations and boss fights to tell the story of the character involved. NSR has one of the best boss lineups I've seen, a whole myriad of memorable characters, and a story that sounds like just a simple revenge fantasy, but winds up being a really clever commentary on the music industry. Sadly, it's not just the good stuff this game takes from those series. Much like No More Heroes, it has some mechanics that probably shouldn't have been there, and a few bosses that aren't up to snuff. And much like Psychonauts, it can be a bit finicky at times and feels like it's over way too fast. Still, this game is a lot of fun, and I hope we get more from these developers. You know, I played a good amount of 3D platformers this year. Poi, Voodoo Vince, Pumpkin Jack, Super Mario 64, and if you had told me a year ago that my favorite of the bunch would be New Super Lucky's Tale, I wouldn't have believed you. But here we are. I tried Super Lucky's Tale a while ago and couldn't get into it. But after hearing good things about New Super Lucky's Tale, I decided to give it a shot and was not disappointed. It's kind of weird because it doesn't seem like this game fully knew what it wanted to be. It's got puzzles, auto runner segments, 2D levels, and 3D levels. The puzzles and auto runners are fine, and the 2D sections are a lot of fun, if a bit simple. The 3D segments, though, are where this game really shines. I'm not sure what it is, but these levels really stand out, both from a visual and design standpoint. They're just really good. The levels in general have plenty of collectibles to look out for, and really make use of the world's theme. The game is a bit easier than I would have liked, but I was still having fun the whole way through. The only thing I find weird about this game is the character designs. They all look really unique, lively, and appealing, except Lucky, who looks like the most generic protagonist they could find. I've had a complicated relationship with the Ace Attorney series. I played the original years ago, long before I even touched Danganronpa, and enjoyed it, but also found it kind of a pain for a variety of reasons. But with how much I enjoyed Danganronpa, and with Ace Attorney Trilogy coming to modern consoles, I decided to give it another shot, and I was not disappointed. While the mysteries themselves weren't as complex as Danganronpa, everything else made up for it. The stories of the cases were good, the characters were all memorable, and the games have a great sense of humor. Which game did I choose for this spot? Do you even need to ask? Trials and Tribulations. Unlike Justice for All, every case in this game is special in its own way. Both the smaller cases serve the overarching story in meaningful ways. The Stolen Turnabout cleverly turns the series formula on its head, Recipe for Turnabout is ridiculous in all the best ways, and Bridge to Turnabout is the best finale I've seen in a video game. In the end, I'm just really glad I got into this series. I plan on replaying the original, but I'm not sure what I'll do about the others. I guess I'll just wait for them to come to a more accessible platform. I played a good deal of Metroidvanias this year. Some I liked, some I didn't, and some I really wanted to like. Out of all of them, though, there was a clear winner. Iconoclasts. This game is most of what you would want from a Metroidvania. Fun gameplay and combat, a nice art style that fits the world really well, fun, unique levels, tons of great bosses, and of course, that story. The story of Iconoclasts takes place in a sci-fi world where you fight against a religious dictatorship. There's a lot going on that's tough to describe, but easy to understand. Things get out of control surprisingly fast, and the game shows you every angle of this conflict, which makes the plot much more interesting and allows for some great characters. Seriously, the characters are easily the best part of this game. They all have conflicting personalities, backstories, and philosophies in regards to the concern. All of them wind up being really interesting and likable. Except Elrond. Screw that guy. I'll admit, this game's not much of a Metroidvania, as it's pretty linear and you don't get a ton of new items, but it's still a great time the whole way through. My thoughts on Persona 4 are long and complicated. I'm planning on giving the game its own review, so you'll hear them soon enough. For right now, though, I'll just say the game's placement on the list should speak for itself. I played a lot more good games this year than I did in previous years, so there were a lot more potential honorable mentions to deal with. For the sake of brevity, I'm only gonna go over the highlights. Sayonara Wild Hearts, a relaxing, creative, and beautiful experience. Dicey dungeons, fun, strategic combat, but not enough to keep me coming back frequently. Ace Attorney Justice for All. Would've been on the list if it weren't for Trials and Tribulations. Animal Crossing New Horizons. Really fun at first, but I stopped after I ran out of things I wanted to do, which was fairly quick since I didn't have the patience to build up my town's rating and get KK Slider to perform. Headlander, a fun Metroidvania with a nice visual style and a unique gimmick. It's not amazing though, and takes a dip toward the end. Detective Grimoire, a fun and simple mystery game. Lily's Day Off, a funny game with a really unique gimmick. Lily's Night Off, Lily's Day Off, but with an actual budget and even funnier endings. Neocab, a fun cyberpunk Uber simulator. Dream Daddy, already explained this one. Pumpkin Jack, came out of nowhere, was a lot of fun, but I didn't like it as much as most people did. AVGN 1 and 2 Deluxe, mostly fun 2D platformers with the occasional horribly unfair level. Catherine Full Body, I've never been in a relationship and I suck at puzzle games, so it just goes to show how good this game is that I actually enjoyed it. The Henry Stickmin Collection, charming, funny, and nostalgic. Also, that final chapter was seriously impressive. Finally, Zero Escape Virtue's Last Reward. I really like the story here, for the most part, but I can't really put it on the list because I didn't play it. I just watched the cutscenes on YouTube, which was the ideal way to experience it, but I don't think it counts. Anyway, on to number 1. Surprising absolutely no one who's been paying attention, my favorite game I played this year was Bug Fables: The Everlasting Sapling. I'm not gonna lie, part of me was hoping something else would challenge Bug Fables for the top spot, but nothing came close. Bug Fables is just that good. I could spend this entry complaining about how much Paper Mario has lost its way and my issues with Origami King, but I'm not going to. You all know the story by now, and focusing on it would be a disservice to Bug Fables. It's more than just another traditional Paper Mario game. It expands on and improves the formula in so many ways. There are some areas where it falls short of Thousand Year Door, but even more where it surpasses it. The battles are much smoother, taking advantage of a decade and a half worth of hindsight. While the main plot of the game is kind of weak, the optional content more than makes up for it, with more exploration options, better side quests, and a massively improved side quest system. The villains might be a bit lackluster, but nearly every NPC was memorable, and the main heroes are fantastic. While the individual chapters may be a bit lacking in variety, at least compared to Thousand Year Door, the locations are still varied, creative, and insanely fleshed out. I never expected a game where everyone's a bug to have world building this good or designs this unique, but they managed to pull it off. In the end, if Luigi's Mansion 3 gave me everything I wanted, this game gave me something I wanted but never thought I would get, and delivered it better than I could have imagined. I am Defoffilizer, and I'm not gonna waste your time talking about what games I'm looking forward to playing next year because there are so many of them. All I'll say is, next year's list will probably be a lot more interesting than this one. Bye!